Assalamu alaikum. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. This is the virtual class of Pakistan International School, Taif. I am Ms. Bushra Tanveer. This is Social Studies class for grade 7. This is our 16th video of this class. In this video, we shall study chapter number 16 from Social Studies book. Dear students, after today's lesson, you will be able to understand the text given in chapter number 16. You will be able to do the MCQs, short question answer, and the exercise question answer from the book. Dear students, now we shall start our chapter 16. The heading of this chapter, The Road to Independence. The First World War took place from 1914 to 18. Indian troops played a large part in the fighting, especially in Mesopotamia, present-day Iraq, where the Muslim soldiers were fighting against the fellow Muslim Turks. Indian soldiers, including Muslims, suffered terrible casualties and very brutal treatment at the hands of the Turkish army. To reward them, the British Prime Minister Lloyd George promised India full self-government after the war, but he didn't say when. Muhammad Ali Jinnah, now the leading Muslim figure and already a member of the Indian Legislative Council, joined the Muslim League in 1913. He became its president 3 years later. He was a strong supporter of a united subcontinent and tried to get the Indian National Congress, the Muslim League, to work together towards this end. Dear students, now the explanation of these lines. First of all, in the very beginning, or in the first line, is discussed about the First World War. It took place in 1914 to 18, and in this World War the Muslim soldiers were fighting against their fellow soldiers, Muslims, Turks, and Indian soldiers, including Muslims, also have the very brutal treatment and at the end of the Turkish army. So the British Prime Minister promised the Indians to reward for this, but when he didn't cleared. And also Muhammad Ali Jinnah, as you know that Qaeda Muhammad Ali Jinnah was the member of the Indian National Congress, but later on in 1913 he joined the Muslim League and he was a strong supporter of United Subcontinent. The promise of the British Prime Minister for full self-government after the war reflect the statements on Palestine. At the same time, the promise of an Arab state and the Balfour Declaration promising a homeland for Jews. The Muslim League was set up in 1916 as a counterbalance to the Indian Congress. It grew in strength and confronted the British authorities. After the partition of Bengal, and also the Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah joined the Muslim League in 1913, and during the Second World War in 1942, when the most of the Indian Congress leaders were imprisoned, the Muslim League expanded rapidly under the leadership of Muhammad Ali Jinnah. From 1940 onwards, the Muslim League main objective was an independent state for Muslims. Dear students, now the next subheading is the Montague-Chelmsford reforms. The reforms of 1921, as they were known, were the third major step towards independence. They proposed the following measures: a central assembly was to set up for India with 144 members, of whom 103 were to be elected by the people. The second point, the assembly could make laws, but the viceroy could, under certain circumstances, veto forbid them. All provinces would have mainly elected assemblies to run health, local government, agricultural, education, the transport, defense, foreign affairs, police, and the budget were still to be the responsibility of the viceroy and his council. The next point of these reforms, there were to be 2 or 3 Indian members of the viceroy close inner cabinet. Dear students, now the explanation of these lines, that is called the Chelmsford reforms. What was that? The Congress rejected the proposal of Chelmsford reforms because a moderate Hindu leader who wanted to work with the Muslim Kochel had died. The next leader was an extremist named Tilak, who wanted total Hindu supremacy. On the side of the Congress were Nehru, Gandhi and Tilak, and on the Muslim side were Muhammad Ali Jinnah and Sir Muhammad Iqbal. Muhammad Ali Jinnah still hoped for the two sides to work together and pleaded at a conference in 1929 for them to unite, but the Congress rejected this proposal, wanting complete power for the Hindus. This rejection seemed to draw up future battle line, and as I told you that the Tilak or the Gandhi, they were the Hindus leader and they were in the favor of Hindus, and the Pakistan for the Muslims, Allama Iqbal and Quaid-e-Azam was in the favor of the Muslims of the subcontinent. Dear students, now the next subheading is the 14 points. At a meeting of the Muslim League in 1929, Muhammad Ali Jinnah said there were 14 points which were essential for Muslims in any future government of India. Among these important points were the following: the government of India must be a federal one, a central assembly for issues which affected the whole of the subcontinent, and the provincial assemblies for regional affairs. Number 2 point is there must be separate electoral rolls for minorities, and Muslims must have at least 1/3 of the seats in the Central Assembly. Point number 3, there must be freedom of religion, education, language and customs for everyone. Point number 4, Muslims and other minorities must have a fair share of senior offices in both central and provincial government. Yes, students, now the explanation of these points. Muhammad Ali Jinnah 14 points were in response to the Nehru, and these points was the Muslim demand for autonomy, equal representation and rights in the federal government. These points were outlined in 1929 when Jinnah still believed in a united India. However, he considering the changing attitude of the Congress and Hindus, these points became a basis of a separate homeland for the Muslims of the subcontinent. And these points was a very important for the Muslim. Dear students, the brief explanation which is given over here, these points, that equal autonomy for every province should be given to Muslims, no bill to be passed by any legislature if 3/4 of the members of any community in that body oppose such a bill. Sindh should be detached from the Bombay Presidency. Any territorial changes must not affect the Muslims majority in Punjab, Bengal, NWFP, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. Muslims be given adequate share together with other Indians in offices and services to that state. Protection for Muslim culture, education, language, religion, personal law and charitable institutions. No cabinet, central or regional, to be without 1/3 Muslim members. No change in the constitution should be made by the central government without agreement of all states in the federation. Yes, students, now the next lines, page 77. On the other hand, in 1930, Sir Muhammad Iqbal at the Muslim League Conference at Allahabad hinted strongly that a separate Muslim state was a possibility. He said that it would be better for everyone if the northwest of the subcontinent was a completely self-governing state, even if within an India federation. The boundaries he suggested for the vague idea of an Islamic state, very roughly similar to those of present-day Pakistan. Students, now the explanation of these lines. The Allama Iqbal at his famous speech at Allahabad Conference in 1930 set out his vision for a Muslim state, which was the real seed of Pakistan, though he did not envisage the eastern wings. His boundaries of Punjab, NWFP, Sindh and Balochistan were very much those of the subsequent West Pakistan and today's state of Pakistan. Dear students, now the next subheading is Roundtable Conferences. The British government organized roundtable conferences in London from 1931 to 1932 to try to sort matters out. At first, Mr. Gandhi didn't attend, but Mr. Jinnah did and stated the case for Muslim people. At the second conference, 1932, Mr. Gandhi appeared and merely repeated his demand for total Hindu majority rule. The third conference didn't take place, but it met with no success as none of the leaders attended. Dear students, now the explanation of these conferences. That the first conference, which took place in 1930 in London, Muhammad Ali Jinnah attended this conference, but Mr. Jinnah didn't attend. In the second roundtable conference, Mr. Gandhi attended this conference and demanded a total Hindu majority rule. And third roundtable conference, none of the leaders attended and no success will be declared for this conference. In 1932, the British government issued the Communal Award, which said that Muslim would have 1/3 of a seat on any central legislative assembly and a percentage of seats on provincial assemblies according to the proportion of the Muslims in the subcontinent. Yes, students, now the next subheading is the Government of India Act 1935. As the parties continued to quarrel with neither side giving way, Britain decided to bring it in its solution, which would be the basis of independence for India. This was the Government of India Act, which was passed in 1935. It stated the following points. India should become a self-governing dominion as soon as possible. Point number 2, it should have a federal system, a central government for the whole of the subcontinent with provincial assemblies for different regions. Point number 3, there would be 11 provinces with Sindh, Bombay and Orissa being separate provinces. Point number 4, ministers in the Viceroy cabinet, the real powerhouse of the government, would be responsible to the mainly elected Central Legislative Assembly. Yes, students, now the explanation of these lines or the Government of India Act 1935. This is covered in this act is discussed about the points that in the first point is written in front of you that India should become a self-governing dominion as soon as possible and it should have a federal system, a central government for the whole of the subcontinent with the provincial assembly for the different region, and there is also the circumstances which led after this act. I shall discuss with you in the end of these points. The point number 5, except for defense and foreign affairs, everything would be in the hand of provincial assemblies. Full dominion status with all powers in the hands of the Muslims of the subcontinent would come in the near future. This solution pleased no one. The Muslim believed quite rightly that they would always be in a minority. The 590 princes did not like the democratic reforms and the Hindus disliked the princes who had a majority in the upper houses. Dear students, the effects of or the circumstances that led to the Government of India Act of 1935, riots and violence broke out all over the subcontinent. Gandhi had vowed to starve himself to death if the situation wasn't changed. If he had done so, there would have been a revolution in India, and no doubt thousands of Muslims would have been slaughtered. Seeing the critical situation, the Britain decided to find its solution and pass the Government Act in 1935. Yes, students, I think each and every thing from the chapter or from the topics is clear to you. Now we shall see the MCQs from this chapter. MCQ number 1. The first round table conference was held in 1930. Correct option 1930. MCQ number 2. The dash government organized round table conference in London. Correct option British government. MCQ number 3. The famous 14 points were presented by Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah. MCQ number 4. The First World War took place in years 1914 to 1918. The correct option is C. MCQ number 5. Mr. Jinnah became the president of Muslim League dash years after he joined it. The correct option B. 3 years. Students, now we shall see the question answer. Short question answer. The first question is, what did Mr. Muhammad Iqbal say at Allahabad conference? He said that it would be better for everyone if the northwest of the subcontinent became a self-governing state, even if it stayed within the Indian Federation. Short question number 2. What is communal award? The answer is, in 1932, the British issued the communal award, which said that the Muslim would have 1/3 of seats in any central legislative assembly, and a percentage of seats on provincial assemblies for Muslims will be according to their proportion in the population of that province. Dear students, now the short question number 3 is, what is a round table conference? The answer is, the British government organized round table conference in London from 1930 to 1932 and tried to sort out the matters between Muslims and Hindus. Question number 4. In which round table conference Gandhi wasn't present? Gandhi was not present at the first round table conference because he was not in the favor of Muslims' presentation in the country. Dear students, now we shall see the exercise question answer, book page 78. The first question, why do you think were the Montague-Chelmsford reforms not very popular? The answer is, the Congress rejected the proposal of Montague-Chelmsford reforms because a moderate Hindu leader who wanted to work with the Muslims had died. The next leader was an extremist named Tilak who wanted total Hindu supremacy. On the side of Congress were Nehru, Gandhi and Tilak, and on the Muslim side were Muhammad Ali Jinnah and Sir Muhammad Iqbal. Mr. Jinnah still hoped for the two sides to work together and pleaded at a conference in 1929 for them to unite, but the Congress rejected this proposal, wanting complete power for the Hindus. This rejection seemed to draw up future battle lines. Students, now the question number 2 is, what are the circumstances that led to the Government of India Act of 1935? The answer is, riots and the violence broke out all over the subcontinent. Gandhi had vowed to starve himself to death if the situation wasn't changed. If he had done so, there would have been a revolution in India, and no doubt thousands of Muslims would have been slaughtered. Seeing the critical situation, the Britain decided to find its solution and passed the Government of India Act in 1935. Students, now the question number 3. Was this act a solution to the problems of the subcontinent? The answer is no, the act was not a solution to the problem. The Government of India Act could have been a significant development in the constitutional and political history of the subcontinent, but unfortunately two parties assumed it negatively. The Muslims thought that in this way they would always be in the minority, and the Hindus disliked all the princes who had majority in the upper house. As a result, there was a disturbance, terrible riots and violence and against the government. Students, now the question number 4 is, in what ways did the 14 points of Mr. Jinnah influence the future of the Muslims in India? Answer is, at a meeting of Muslim League in 1929, Mr. Jinnah said that there are 14 points that were essential for Muslims in any future government of India. Mr. Jinnah made suggestions for new boundaries of provinces, especially for the main religious areas. He still wanted both parties of the subcontinent to be united for when they gained independence. On the other hand, at a conference in 1930, it was strongly hinted that a separate homeland for the Muslims was at very much possibility. The boundaries Mr. Jinnah had suggested earlier were taken into consideration, and the vague idea of modern-day Pakistan structure was given. Dear students, now the homework is learn and write MCQs, short and exercise question answers which are done today. See you in the next video. Goodbye.